Calvin Batley, the rank was PO3, the FA division. It was a great feeling. You had enough of it, and you was ready to go home. And the fact I mentioned earlier that it was extremely cold over there, it was a relief to get out of it, because when you worked up topside, you wore all these foul weather clothes, where you had, like on the 40 millimeters, you're out in the open, and if you were forward, you're catching all of the wind. If you're heading into the north in the Sea of Japan, ship running at 22 knots and the wind coming down at maybe 30 to 40 or 50 knots, you had a lot of wind coming at you. And no matter how many clothes you put on, you were going to be cold. And the clothes that we wore were fur-lined coveralls, fur-lined coat, fur-lined cap, goggles, face mask, your regular socks, or maybe two pair, a pair of shoes, a pair of felt liners, and a snow boot. And I tell you, you stay up there for 4 hours, you couldn't do it. You just have to rotate. And when I was first over there, that's what we did. We had two people on the 40 millimeter director. One of them was a sound powered guy, and one was an operator. And we'd take, when you were standing by, we'd take turns. Somebody had to be on the sound powered phone, and the other guy would bail out and go somewhere where he could get away from the wind. And it was tough to stay up there about an hour at a time, about all you could stand with. We come back from the States, and they had 3 leave parties, one from Long Beach, 14 days, and we had a midshipman cruise requirement once we got back through the canal to Norfolk, our east coast port. And so the people on the east, when they went through the canal back to the east coast, those leave parties had 8 days each. And then we had to meet our requirements for the midshipman cruise. And I took mine from Long Beach. I took a Greyhound bus from Long Beach to San Diego to where I lived near Mobile, Alabama. And then after my 14 days was up, or I'd go headed to Norfolk by a Greyhound bus again. Met the ship in Norfolk, and that was the story of my leave party. We went on a midshipman cruise, and I believe that cruise was the middle midshipman cruise while I was on the ship, which we ended up going to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Actually, we picked up the Navy personnel in Annapolis. In order to go to Annapolis, we had to unload some of the fuel off the ship, all the ammo, get it up out of the water about another 3 feet, go up Chesapeake Bay to Annapolis, and we were anchored there probably a couple of days. We were allowed to go to the Naval Academy and go visit the engineering building, various facilities at the academy. I spent a good bit of time in the engineering building looking at the ship models and stuff. And then you come back out to the ship. The midshipmen they had small sailboats, and they were learning how to navigate and sail with these small boats out in the area of the bay where we were anchored. And of course, going up, the ship is so close to the bottom of the channel, it was stirring up mud from the bottom. You go back to the stern, you can see the water being discolored from the mud. It was being churned up behind it. And we come back out of the academy area. We come back to an anchor point in the bay or channel at Norfolk, off of the main channel, and reloaded ammo, reloaded fuel and stuff like that. And the experience with reloading ammo, I happened to, when you're either loading or unloading, it's all hand effort, and no smoking and all that. So they set up a truck with a crane on it up on the fantail of the ship on the stern to lift these pallets of ammo out of a barge, and it's got a cover of it, but it's got open hatches, and part of it's an overhead hatch that close it up to keep the weather off of this ammo. And the crane lifts the pallet up. Well, I was assigned to the barge itself to make sure it was all cabled up and everything properly, and then they lift it out. Well, lo and behold, a ship come through the channel, created a wake, kind of made the barge unstable. They were lifting out at the same time. The guy was lifting was paying attention to the pallet down below and wasn't paying attention to the wake coming. And when that wake hit the barge, it kind of made it unstable, as I mentioned. And he hooked the pallet on the covering of the barge, and the spill, they were lifting 40-millimeter cans of 40-millimeter projectiles. These are about 4 clips, 4 in a clip, 4 clips, 16 projectiles in a can. The can weighed about 110 pounds. Well, it hooked it, dumped them cans of ammo down to the barge, bent them all up. Of course, I was ready to jump overboard. I didn't know what was going to happen, but if it had to explode, I had all this ammo down there, not knowing what might happen. It was a kind of unsettling experience. But they had small arms ammo, had some chemical stuff down there, maybe some mustard gas and what have you. Had all kinds of junk on the barge. But that was a kind of unsettling experience. Well, when we loaded, we already had the midshipmen aboard, so all we had to do was load fuel and ammo and proceed to our destination, which was Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. And we come back, we stopped in, I don't remember the name of the place, but in the east side of the canal. There was a town on the east side of the Panama Canal, and we stopped there, and then back to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for some gunnery practices for the midshipmen. We come back to the States, from there back to Norfolk, unload ammo, unload fuel, proceed back to the channel to Annapolis, and they got off at that point. We'd come back and redone the same thing we did earlier, reload ammo, reload fuel, be prepared to go on any mission assigned. Well, in the fall of 1954, September of 1954, we were going to be decommissioned, so they alerted everybody and some of the people that took off with the ship, but they moved the ship through the canal to the west coast to be decommissioned at Bremerton. And of course, at that time, I had earlier started out in Bremerton recommissioning a ship, so I knew what was coming as far as decommissioning the ship. I was going to go back to Bremerton where I'd started out. So I wanted, it was a great place to be ported or be assigned. So I was looking forward to going up there. And we proceeded into Bremerton Sound, I guess you would refer to it as. They did a stop in Seattle, and then we did a bypass of Tacoma, Washington. They did a tour down through these waterways and did a bypass of Tacoma, Washington, and then we proceeded into Bremerton shipyard or naval yard to proceed through the process of decommissioning the ship, such as mothballing them. In our situation, we opened all the machined areas, bearing areas, gear areas, and put little bags similar to a tobacco bag, an old-time tobacco bag full of silicone gel, a drying agent. Put that inside of these areas, greased all these gears, bearings, machine services, closed them back up. If the gaskets were bad, we ordered and replaced gaskets, all this stuff. And I did that for Sky One, along with a seaman helped me do that in Sky One. And then when I was finished with that, they we had to paint all the surface, make sure all the painted surface was in good condition, inside and out. And then after that was finished, they assigned me back to after air defense, where Sky 4 was. We had some auxiliary directors back there, and we had to, and barrel switches and so forth. We had to do the same thing. We had to, if they required greasing, we did that. If they required painting or whatever, drying agents, so we did whatever is required. And the same way with the gun director itself. I had two seamen back there, and we only had from maybe around the middle of September until I left the ship on a decommission, part of the decommission crew. Probably the largest group left for reassignment or discharge. It was in about the 23rd of January of 1955. So we were there from maybe the 15th of September until January of 55. There was some left after that. I don't know the story on those. There was a small group, mainly higher ranked enlisted people, to do some administrative work as well as maybe some physical work in decommissioning the ship. And, there was various things that people did. They had to inventory all the parts systems, and make sure that they were, we had all the parts that were required for these systems be ordered and put back in the kits and so forth before we left. I didn't have a part in that, but that was some of the things that were done on